Hello! We are here once again for another episode of Designer's Corner. Thank you very much for joining us. All right. Okay, here we go. Let me get the music going in the background. All right. And this time around, this week, we're actually turning a corner. We are entering into week 3. The weeks aren't actually 7-day weeks. It's just the name I chose for different sessions here. We're on about session 11, but we're getting into design thinking. So, to get through the introductions, I'm your host Josh. I'm a UX designer. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter. Go check out the Twitter to stay up to date for our posts. I'll let you know on the day of if we're going live or if we're going to skip for the week. We're coming from a 2-week skip. 2 weeks ago, Labor Day, then we had a skip week. So now we're back again. All right, just for a little class overview, this is what we're entering into. We are on week 3 here. We've gone through the introduction of the course. We've gone through some of the tools, Photoshop, Google Slides, and Figma as well. So gotten through that, and now we're entering into week 3, design thinking. So this is very exciting. We're partway through the course. Most of our time is probably going to be spent on the tools. So this next second half here, week 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, should be a little bit faster. We'll probably end up spending some more time once again toward the end on about week 7, week 6, building the resume, building the portfolio. But for the most part, here we are. So we've gotten through Photoshop, Google Slides, and Figma. Again, celebrate, you've graduated those aspects of designing, you know a little bit of the fundamentals, and that's enough to get you started. You're able to handle some of your own when it comes to these programs. It'll hopefully make you a better designer, a more skilled worker or employee in the first place, and now you can add it to your resume, and hopefully it'll help you get a job, or if you're just looking to do it as a hobby, hopefully you'll be able to build your skills. It gives you a foundation to work with. So we have a design exercise of the week again. This was posed on Twitter. The question was, which is better? And in case you can't really see it, he's asking which form of login is better? Left side A or right side B? Both of them will have a login button, but just to highlight it here, he has a single sign-on for Google, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and both should work about the same. The idea here is that there is an argument to be made for either or. On the left side, it's stacked. It says the text next to it, sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook. It would not allow for you to conserve space and stack them horizontally left to right like an option B. Now we can make an argument for either case. In A, it's a little wordier, it probably gives a little better of a description of what's going on. Side B, because it's located so close to the login and there's the or in between, it gives the impression that it's probably the single sign-on. A lot of different apps have been using single sign-on, allowing you to probably log in with Google, Apple, Facebook, different myriad of interconnected apps. But for the purposes of good design, the answer is going to be A. And someone left a comment that said, A, always use icons with text, and that is the best answer, the best response for this type of conundrum. So even though option B is very clean, very aesthetically pleasing, it doesn't actually give you the entire story, and it may leave some users confused as to what the purpose of the buttons is. So here on the left side with A, it says sign in with certain program. On the right side, although as modern users we're probably accustomed to single sign-on, it doesn't necessarily let you know that that's going to be the response from the button. So the button could potentially take you to its Google review page, or it could take you to its Facebook or LinkedIn page. But we assume, because it's located close to the login button, it's going to be the single sign-on, but it doesn't necessarily say that. And that's why A is the stronger option. And as always, use icons with text. So make sure you're thinking about this stuff. And it's actually a great segue into what we're talking about this week, which is, of course, design thinking. So from Ramon, a great comment to leave and a great explanation. And as long as you have an explanation for the choices that you make, as long as you can kind of defend your choices, you're doing some good design thinking. So this week in Designer's Corner, what is design? If you remember from one of the first weeks, we actually asked this question and answered it at the same time. And this is one of the first things that we looked at when we covered the concept of UX design. What is design? Well, design is problem solving. When we're looking to solve a problem, when we're looking to design, we need to answer a question. It's going to help us achieve a goal. And we can either do this in a straightforward manner, not very complicated, or it could be something that is, innovative, that leads to new innovations, that leads to new ideas, that leads to new processes or ways to kind of tackle the problem. But inevitably, design thinking will allow you to choose the best solution. So sometimes we want a simple solution. Sometimes, the solution that we should go with, the best solution, isn't convoluted. It isn't intricate. It's simple and it gets the job done quickly, and we don't need more than that. Sometimes we would like to innovate. Sometimes we would like to propose a new process, something that's more innovative, something that can solve it in a more efficient manner, something that can, get the job done better than any of the solutions that currently exist out on the market. Whether the market is actually, apps and websites and the actual market where you can buy stuff, or just the general sense of, ideas floating around in the ether, that market. So any type of design or intention that gets a job done better than something or some sort of process that already exists is going to be good design thinking. So then we have design and we have thinking. So what is a thought? So we need to think before we design. To design is to think, but when we're faced with a problem, we don't want to run at it headlong. We want to make sure that we are prepared for the design process. And that's where the thinking comes in, because we want to ideate, we want to come up with different solutions, we want to examine around the problem to make sure that we've kind of covered it from all angles. So we want to make sure that we're thinking, design thinking. So ideation is the process of getting your ideas out as quickly as possible. Some of these ideas will potentially help us to answer the question. Some of them will be more effective, some of them will be less effective. It doesn't matter. The purpose of ideation is to be very rapid about it and to get your ideas out as quickly as possible to be able to have a myriad of ideas that you want to kind of, a pool that you want to kind of dip your hand into, reach around, pull an idea out and say yes or no to. This way, if you need to either defend a case with anyone who, is looking for certain ideas or looking for different approaches, different concepts, all that kind of stuff, you'll have a myriad of ideas that may or may not fit their situation, but it may come close, and together the two of you can kind of work something out. This way you're not stuck with one idea that you had while they're looking for a different idea, but hopefully you'll find some common ground. So sports, when we look at sports, this demands quick thinking. You have to think on the fly, you have to kind of examine your surroundings, understand the situation, and make a split-second decision. When it comes to designing, now designing can be overall a slower process. Designing and development can be a slow process. Now in the agile world, we try to make it as quick as possible. Businesses want to get their product out the door as soon as possible. But overall, it's not going to be like sports or any type of, quick reflex field that you need to, think on your feet in such a manner. However, that doesn't mean that we're working slow. We want to think quickly. So as designers, we want to be quick thinkers, and we want to get those ideas out one after the other after the other. As they say, fail fast, fail often. This is a grand motto of UX design and design thinking, because even though some of your ideas are going to be stinkers, some of them are going to be winners, and you can't necessarily decide which one is going to come in which order. So the best approach is to get all your ideas out one after the other. One idea could lead to a different idea that turns to a better idea. Maybe you don't even happen upon the overarching idea that answers the problem by the end of your ideation session, but give it some time. It may lend itself to a dream that allows you to understand the process or understand the problem a little bit better, and then allows you to answer the question. So sometimes you land on the idea, sometimes you don't, but the point is to get your ideas out as quickly as possible, so that way you have a foundation to kind of work off of. And same way that any field might want to practice something. You might want to practice something right, you might want to practice it wrong, or at least think about it in the wrong terms, so that you kind of understand more and less of what to do and what not to do. So then we get further from the goal. So when it comes to designing, sometimes the purpose of designing and the purpose of problem solving is to get closer to a goal. You want to solve for a problem, you want to create a solution. However, sometimes we want to work our way away from the problem that we're trying to solve. Sometimes we want to almost unintuitively answer not the question. We have a question or a problem that we're posed with, but we want to answer opposite of that. We want to answer outside of that. And by doing so, it can help to wholly understand the problem and the context. And it may spawn a better solution by the end of it. Sometimes the question seems so straightforward that the first answer that we come up with, even though it might be very legit and solve for the problem, sometimes it's not the best solution. And so sometimes if we're able to answer opposite of the question that we're trying to answer in the first place, it can help us to see more of a scope, more of a picture, broader picture. So let's say, take this for example, if we were trying to match red, if we were trying to get red as our goal, sometimes you might want to think about blue. You might want to ask the question, what is blue? What does blue stand for? What is the significance of the color blue? And sometimes this can help us to better understand what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve the color red. Although we know that we want to land on red as our goal, it's not always understood why we want to do that. And to be able to answer everything in and around the problem, that can lead to a more intuitive, more in-depth solution, something that's more mature as an idea than a simple, straightforward answer that simply answers the question and does nothing else to question it. Some of the best solutions are seemingly less intuitive. So as an example here, as the legend goes, The Legend of Zelda, as Shigeru Miyamoto was beta testing the game, he initially started you out with your character, Link, with a sword, and you would go on a quest and yada yada yada. However, the testers, they kind of found it boring. They didn't really take to the game too well. And as we all know, Zelda, the series, is wildly successful. So how do we end up getting there? As the story goes, Shigeru Miyamoto kind of rebelliously took away the sword as a starting prop for the user, for the gamer, and kind of said, okay, if you think it's so good, if you think you're so good, or if you think it's so easy, go ahead, start without it, and I'll let you kind of figure it out on your own. This time around, they found that, or Shigeru Miyamoto in his testing found that the gamers actually took to this. They enjoyed the experience a lot more. more of an adventure for them now that they had to kind of work toward that first goal of getting the sword. And so, even though, it's very counterintuitive, the entire point of the game is to kind of battle monsters, save the princess, and all that kind of stuff. To start out without a sword is very counterintuitive to what the purpose of the game is. So sometimes the answer is counterintuitive to what you may believe you're trying to achieve, to what the goal you're setting out to achieve is. And this could lead to better results. So sometimes you want to go in the opposite direction in order to land at the mark you're trying to hit. Next, we need to question everything. So pull back the lens. When you have a problem or a situation, you need to ask why. You should be asking why all along the process. And this leads to the why game. And the why game, asking why, part of the why game, the more you can ask about a situation, the more you can begin to break it down into its fundamental components. And once you've broken it down enough, hopefully you'll arrive at one of the deepest meanings of the question that you're trying to answer. Some questions, seem straightforward on the surface, but as you ask why, you'll find yourself also answering the same question. And then you'll find that the answers become more in depth, lend themselves to a clearer idea of what the situation is that's going on, and it can help you to understand and think about the situation from a different perspective. So you'll want to break it down into those building blocks, ask why, and then be able to answer that question at the same time. Just as a little anecdote, in my own work situation, I remember that we were trying to figure out the best way to show a error state or an error message if a user entered the wrong address or a bad address into the Google Maps system. And then eventually, we were kind of bickering back and forth, going at it, saying, we should do this, we should do that, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of occurred to me, like, who are we to, why are we throwing an error in the first place? Who are we to say that the address isn't legitimate? If you think about new developments of houses and stuff like that, a lot of times you'll have addresses that are completely legitimate, but they just haven't been entered into Google Maps or anything like that. So instead of telling the person that there's an error in the address that they entered, why not instead just let them know that we don't recognize the address? And so instead of bickering back and forth and going deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole of how exactly to error out the situation, the better approach was to actually take a step back and ask, why would we show an error in the first place? And then that allowed us to get to a better solution where we said, okay, sometimes it can be legit, sometimes it might not be, but either way, let's figure out how we're going to tackle it. And then we end up using some solution that kind of went along those guidelines, but you get the idea. So you want to make sure that you have a purpose when you're designing. As they say, no fish goes anywhere without a porpoise. So your purpose should be to set out with a greater goal than to make pretty pictures. Sometimes people get distracted with UX and more so UI or graphic design and think that it's mostly about making pretty pictures. But it's important to keep in mind the scope of the project and that you're trying to answer a problem, solve for a problem, get to a certain goal. And in doing so, in keeping a clear perspective, you can also avoid or eliminate the fluff. See, there are a lot of things that might bog down your product, and it might actually impede. Some of the ideas that you have might actually get in the way of other functions that the product or the app or anything else is intended to, solve. So the product is intended to solve a certain purpose, a certain question or problem, and by building it up too much, you can actually hinder or impede what you're actually trying to solve. So we can get rid of that by keeping a clear perspective and understanding what the purpose of the goal is in the first place, and then not going too deep, not getting too caught in the weeds, and instead, pulling back just a little bit just to say, did we answer the problem? Did we answer the question? If yes, sometimes good enough just to continue on. You don't need to do more than what you've already done. So, who is a designer is the question. Some people probably think that it's something that you have to be born with, but design thinking is a practiced art. So you can cultivate the skills needed, and it just takes practice. So when it comes to thinking, there are certain signs of a bad thinker. So a good thinker will be many of the opposite traits of this. However, a bad thinker is comprised of the inability to dig deeper. So if you're not willing to kind of, dig into the problem that you're trying to solve, if you're only looking at it at a surface level, if you're not asking why and asking deeper, more meaningful questions to try to unearth the underlying problem, then you're not practicing good design thinking. You're searching for maybe closer for the solution that you're searching for may be closer or further than initially anticipated. And sometimes you can only know this by asking the right questions and giving it some time too. Speaking of time, impatience is the second trait of a bad thinker. If you don't allow yourself time for the creative juices to flow, then you won't get to the best solution. You might end up with a solution. Sometimes you'll have some ideas that spawn immediately, but sometimes you need to sleep on it. Sometimes it happens overnight. Sometimes it comes to you in a dream. Sometimes it happens while you're singing in the shower. No one can say when it's going to happen, but the answer may be revealed at a later time than one, you're anticipating, but two, the moment that you're posed with the problem is the same moment that you probably found out that there even was a problem. So you shouldn't expect the solution to occur in that exact same moment when you first found out that there was a problem. You need to give it some time. Okay? When it comes to impatience, sometimes, we might want to rush. We put down 1, 2, 3 ideas. Okay, that's enough. No. It's better to get out even more ideas, and even if you do land on a good idea, sometimes you might want to put out 5, 6, 7, 8 ideas, and even if you feel like you've run out of good ideas, that 1, 2, and 3 were your best ideas, and 5, 6, 7, 8 were stinkers, it's good to not get impatient. It's good to continue to give it time, because the thinking process is like weightlifting. The more you do it, the stronger you'll get at it. But regardless, you're always going to get tired at some point, so don't be afraid to take a break and walk away. All right? Like, even if you can bench press 300 pounds, probably weren't doing that on your first day. You probably need to build up to that. And even if you can bench press 300 pounds right now, eventually you're going to get fatigued. You can't do it for 3 hours straight or anything like that. So sometimes it's best to take a break, walk away. Everyone is going to get fatigued, and everyone is going to end up becoming impatient by the process of thinking. So it's good to remember to take breaks. Having a one-track mind. This is the third sign of a bad thinker. So stopping on your first idea, even though you may get lucky and it may satisfy the required problem set, there are many other ideas that are left on the table because of this. You may not realize the shortcomings of the pitfalls of the initial idea that you came up with. So sometimes certain ideas allow you to understand, how other ideas that you previously had were better or worse. And this only, it's very easy to see that when you are coming up with stinkers after you've had a great idea. But sometimes it's less intuitive, and certain ideas that you don't necessarily think work better reveal shortcomings of other ideas that you thought were going to work a little bit better, but then all of a sudden, just even from the practice of running through the situation a couple times from a couple different angles, reveals different aspects. And that's again why we need to ask why. That's why we need to broaden our scope about asking what we're doing with this certain problem, or what problem we're trying to solve in the first place. To understand the full scope of it allows us to get a better handle on everything. So, failing to answer the question. So, oftentimes we might get impressed by our own work, and you might get invested in a certain idea. But, no matter how many ideas you've gone through, even if you love a certain idea, even if it's, let's say you're the greatest ideator of all time, and you believe that, your 10th idea is always going to be better than your first, or your 200th is going to be better than your 10th. Sometimes, and in the mix, you're not going to be able to decide for yourself when a good idea is going to spawn. And so, even if you like an idea, it may not answer the question. It may not solve for the problem that you're trying to solve for. So in those cases, it's always best to reel it back and go with a simpler solution. Go with maybe even one of the first couple of ideas that you had that was more immature, but more straightforward and answers the question better. As of course, as you go along, as you can build something up, it will become prettier. It will probably become bogged down. It will probably, have more features in it, and just from the aspect of build up over time, it will just look like it's a better idea because it's a bigger idea. But bigger isn't always better. So sometimes you want to go back to a simpler solution, one that, even if it's not the best solution, as long as it's answering the question, there's always time to innovate later. There's always time to ideate and update your idea with a better version. But this goes back to point number 2. Don't be impatient. Give it time and choose the answer or the solution that works the best. Might not be the prettiest, but if it works, it works. So go ahead and use that idea. Don't be afraid to kill your darlings. This is a very important idea. Kill your darlings. Even though you have a bunch of great ideas, and even though you might be tied to some of these ideas, and you really, hang on to them. Hang on to your ideas. You can use them at a later time. But for this project, for this problem, go ahead and scrap it. Get rid of it. Throw it out. It's not going to work. We all love that one idea, and it looks amazing. You spent 10 hours on it, and it looks so good. Go ahead and get rid of it. Don't use it. It looks great. Use it somewhere else, not here. And then last one, number 5, we have selfishness. So designers can often get married to their work, and sometimes we see it as art. But other people have opinions too. Other people have different perspectives that they bring to the situation. And on top of that, they, besides the aspect of teamwork, which is always great to, exercise, you want to work in teams. You want to work with other people. You want to get a second opinion for your idea. And so it's always good to listen to other people's idea. And even, regardless of if they have a good idea or a bad idea, you'll make that decision. But it's better to try to marry multiple ideas. It's better to try to listen to someone, understand their perspective, and then see if their idea has merit and can even work in tandem your idea. And then that can cultivate a better solution by the end of it. Plus, it's way better to work in a team because a lot of the times other people know what they want. They don't know how to get there exactly. You have the talent and the technical skills to design it, but in their mind, they know they have the vision. They can see it clearly, and sometimes they know exactly what they want. You'll be there to kind of, help them if they need a little push in the right direction. But for the most part, a lot of the time, they'll give you the answer too. They'll tell you exactly what they want, and it'll take all the guesswork off your plate. It's the greatest thing ever. They'll do all the work. They'll give you all the ideas. They'll tell you place this here, that here, this here, and as long as everything makes sense to you and there's no like hiccups or flaws in the system that you can see, then go ahead. The customer is always right, even though the customer is always wrong. Give them exactly what they want, and you'll have a happy customer. All you have to do is just add pictures. It's the laziest thing ever, and it's great. So don't be afraid to work with other people. They'll give you 9 out of 10 times, they'll tell you exactly what to do, and you just have to add water. So we got the good and the bad here. So when we look at this, and this should actually be number 8. Sorry about that. So we got the good and the bad here. And what separates good design from bad design? Well, it's going to come down to, on the side of good design, level of effort. Good design will understand and take into account the amount of effort that we want to spend on a project. Sometimes you need to get something done in 10 minutes and it doesn't call for an elaborate solution. Sometimes you do have time to ideate and come up with a better solution, and you have that time afforded to you, and you have the resources. You're working with a really good dev who knows how to do some really fancy stuff. So go ahead and use those resources, use the time, use the developer or engineer or whoever else that you're working with that knows how to do this stuff and can get it done quickly, efficiently, in their own time. And yeah, the level of effort can help determine, and by taking into account the level of effort, it can help determine what type of solution you're looking for. Good ideas can be innovative and creative. So, that just kind of happens over time and with ideation, with putting down a bunch of ideas. It's usually simplified. There's simplification to it. A lot of times you'll see, and this is what a lot of programs or even companies will do, even with their logos. They'll simplify over time, and simplified ideas are never wrong. So in this time, in this modern era that we're in, we have a lot of simplified ideas and marketing and everything else like that. We've got a lot of rounded edges. We've got a lot of icons and stuff like that. But it's all for the purpose of trying to make things simpler, trying to make things cleaner, trying to make things more readable. And so those are good. That's good design thinking. Those are good ideas. They don't always work, but the idea and the intention is there. A good idea will also meet the goal, as we've been talking about this entire time. You want to set out to, answer a question or meet a problem and solve it. So a good idea does that. And a good idea has a foundation of thinking. So as we'll get into in later topics, we'll talk about design principles and so forth. But there's going to be some merit to your idea. There's going to be some legitimacy, some logical process that you use to say, this will be the best outcome and here's why, A, B, C, D. So yeah, you'll want to make sure that you have a little bit of a foundation to it. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to know exactly why an idea works or anything like that, but as long as you can defend it to some degree, then that makes it a better idea. However, a bad idea is usually haphazard. It's slapped together. It's the first thing that you thought of. It doesn't have a lot of, thinking behind it. It uses roundabout solutions that are not, as simple, that are, take the long way around to get to whatever the answer is that you're trying to solve. It uses one too many steps, perhaps. It's overtly complex. You want to make sure that your UI, especially, is simple. You want normal people, to be able to answer the question of how do I use this? If you can think of iPhone, or if you can think of even Google with their search bar, just a regular Google page, it basically lends itself to only one option. It says Google at the top, and there's a search bar in the middle, and there's not a lot of distraction there. There's nowhere else to go except to Google question that you have, and so it's very intuitive for that reason. It's not complex. It doesn't do too much. Google does have a lot of other features, available, but the main purpose and the main page of Google just leaves you with just that search bar, and to get you started with. So that's very simple, and it doesn't distract, so everyone at this point knows how to do a Google search. A bad idea will fail to solve for the question, so regardless of how pretty the idea is, if it doesn't solve for the question, if it doesn't solve the problem, it's still a bad idea. And it's usually a quick fix. There's times when, you need a quick fix to a problem that you're having, but, to just slap something together, again, the haphazard, to just kind of put a fix in place, it's usually not the best solution. So this one doesn't necessarily have to be a bad design, but it's probably not the best design. So just remember, good designers are muscle memory. It just takes practice. It just comes down to remembering design thinking, principles of design, and so forth. But it just comes down to having had the practice and developing the muscle memory to design. Great designers are born not from talent, but the resourcefulness to question everything. If you want to be a great designer, you want to make sure that you're questioning, that you're understanding, that you're listening more than you're speaking, and that you're willing to work with others. It's the potential to understand a problem that makes a great designer. A good designer will have answers. A great designer comes with questions that break down the problem and help us to answer every aspect of it, and to help us to come up with the more creative, better, more intuitive, more effective solution at the end of it. Although we can always, in most cases, answer a question, sometimes we have to question why we're answering that question in the first place to get to the true heart of the question that we want to answer. It's not always surface level. Sometimes it's a little bit deeper than that. So that concludes today's talk about design thinking. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed having you here. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, stay up to date, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. You'll be alerted to new videos that come out. And yeah, thank you again for joining us. As always, there'll be some links in the appendix. Go get started on your design journey today. Thank you. See you later.